It's been a dream of mine to do something like this. For as long as I can remember, I've had an obsession with Star Wars. So here it is. This is my story. I found hundreds of dollars worth of Star Wars action figures buried in my basement. Looking through YouTube, I found some interesting dioramas and came across a few I loved, so I decided to try it out. A little over my head, I think, but I loved the challenge. I wanted to showcase two of my favorite scenes from Star Wars. I'm sure I'll get a lot of grief from this, but this ain't even close to canon. This is why it's called Star Wars Reimagined. It's sort of a fantasy amongst a fantasy world. A few things line up, but the timeline doesn't fit at all. This was completely my intention. I decided on the Death Star hallway, meeting up with the Naboo Palace generator room, located just below the palace. I always loved the scene where Qui-Gon thrusted his lightsaber through the door of the Trade Federation starship just to get to the Viceroy. The sheer power of the lightsaber melting the metal was amazing, and I really wanted to replicate it. I used some design work I found online for the Death Star, but in the Naboo generator room, I had to work this design from scratch. The plot was obvious and easy to me. Making a diorama of this plot, on the other hand, was another story. Size of the diorama versus the scale of the characters was important. Too small and I couldn't fit all the characters, but too large, the characters lose perspective. Placing characters in the correct spot and telling a story without any moving parts is a lot of fun, but it's also very difficult. I went through a few ideas, but I really knew what I wanted from the onset. My first run went well, using the black poster board and the Cricut Maker. It really gave me a sense of scale. A little too big in the first run, so I scaled it down a touch. I've seen bookshelf dioramas that have scenes stacked on top of each other, but I wanted to tell my story side by side. The Cricut Maker machine worked great on the poster board for the trial runs. I really wanted to keep on using it for the whole project. I love the idea of using the gloss black 1/8" acrylic. After some research, it looked like the knife cutter blade for the Cricut, and the thinner acrylic will work just fine. 57 passes. It didn't even scratch the surface. Convinced quickly I needed something stronger. I then bought the D1 5-watt laser cutter through Xtool. When I got the laser cutter engraver, it was very easy to put together and install. I was very, very happy with the quality. I do wish the software was a little bit better, but not bad for beginners. I do love the quality and how precise this diode cutter is. For $375, I was willing to work with whatever deficiency this machine and software had. The first piece of acrylic cut through like butter. The second piece, with all the same settings, would hardly cut at all. If you managed to get the material lined up perfectly for a second or third pass, it would just melt the product. The acrylic looks really, really nice when it's cut perfectly, but it's so darn brittle. So then I decided to go with another material instead. Cut the Death Star floors perfectly out of the acrylic and kept it. I went with 1/8" basswood instead, basically like hobby wood. There was a lot of money wasted. It worked out great for the most part, but just remember, each piece has a slightly different density because it is organic, so you may have to run at different power settings. or try more or less passes or speeds. But again, a lot more forgiving of a material than the acrylic is. The base of the platform was easy and quick. Just some plywood and some 1x stock. I decided to leave a cavity at the bottom of the platform to run wiring. I have really large hands and I wish I built the cavity a little taller. But I also didn't want the diorama to be too large. The Naboo side was a combination of basswood with evergreen matte black polystyrene sheets for accents. As I mentioned before, I was able to get the floors of the Death Star done by using the acrylic. It took about 6 tries, but it came out precise. I then used the same technique for the walls. After cutting the details out for the walls, I also engraved where I wanted to put the cutouts for the boxes for the walls. Only for reference. This proved to save a lot of time because there was a lot of polystyrene pieces to put into place for the raised panel look I was looking for. This worked amazing. The walls and floors fit together rather easily using slot joints. Each piece was delicately placed and glued using 3M Scotch Weld PR40. There are a lot of different types of glues out there that I could have used. Let me tell you, this is the strongest and fastest glue I've ever used. A little goes a very long way. So I used tiny throwaway brushes that I bought from Walmart. You've got one shot and about 2 seconds before game over. This sticks to everything, including skin. Every piece of basswood I cut, I then conditioned with Minwax sanding sealer before using Rust-Oleum 2X matte black spray paint. I decided to go with LED dimmable strip lighting behind the walls and under the floors. 30 feet just barely worked, but it worked out great. Having a dimmable allows different perspectives. The windows and the walls where the light comes through, I used 1/8" frosted acrylic. Come to find out, clear, frosted, and transparent acrylic will not cut with a laser cutter. The light passes right through the material. The light is actually what cuts. Tried and true, sharp utility knife and a level. Just score it a bunch of times and it worked fine. This part was somewhat of a challenge. Again, because my hands are so big. Using polystyrene for the half circle shaft. I cut out the light boxes using the laser cutter and then found some thin frosted sheets from a local hobby store just to diffuse the lights I had behind it. I then cut out a small hole to insert a blinking red LED light. I trimmed out the top of the shaft with basswood, again using the X tool. For the generator force fields, I used fluorescent pink transparent acrylic and then backlit them. There are so many theories why those force fields are even there. I am very proud to say I am one of the worst solderers out there. I can get by just fine, but I'd rather find other means to connect wires. These mini wire connectors were a lifesaver, and you can get them in all different sizes. For the Droidicas, I wanted a lit laser blast, more of a plasma blast. I first used a rigid wire as the backbone, then adhered 4 red micro LED lights to the wire. Used some hot glue, and then teased it until I had something I liked. I did like it, but I did not love it. Tried this about 3 more times, still didn't love it. Also tried thick fiber optic wire and a bright LED light. It wasn't bright enough, and didn't carry the light throughout the side fire fiber optic wire. Doing more research, and I was watching videos of LED filaments doing the job well, but can be rather unsafe. I was leaning in the direction of using battery powered instead of plug-in. Taking the filament out of a low voltage Edison bulb, I thought was going to work great. No sir. Evidently low wattage means high voltage. Finally found a company online called Brick Stuff. Nobody at all mentioned them online. I then emailed them about what I wanted and needed, and they got right back to me with great advice. I ended up getting red, rigid LED filament, 3 volt, 38mm long. Worked perfectly, but extremely brittle. Nice and bright, and looks like a legit laser blast. I was even able to try out making my first lightsaber with these filaments. First shot and it worked out great. I ended up using the original Darth Maul lightsaber hilt and mounted the filaments directly to it. I did need something brighter than the lightsabers I purchased because of the super bright fluorescent pink force fields in the background. Whenever you need to solder delicate connections, I highly recommend a shrink tube instead of solder. It's all a low voltage setup, and the shrink tube sucks right around your connections easily with a heat gun. I decided to make a burning fire pile, where a laser blast reflected back off of one of the battle droids. A pretty easy venture. I used several yellow flickering lights and mounted them to a piece of scrap acrylic. Built up some hot glue, and teased it again and again to make a fire look. Painted with layers of acrylic paint colors for the light to bounce off of it, completely hidden behind the battle droid. I was trying to simulate sparks. I tried many versions of fiber optics. This proved to be a real pain. Ultimately figured it out, but it was tough. One big key to this project is I needed lit lightsabers. I found a company named Indosabers. Great to talk to online, and they walk you through what you need and perhaps a few things that you didn't think of. Battery powered or micro USB powered with longer cables available upon request. I highly recommend it. Go with the flickering sabers with remote control. Again, very fragile, but a lot of thought was put into these sabers. I put a lot of time and effort into making this my focal point, without making it seem like it was my focal point. You will see in the final product, Qui-Gon is hid a little bit behind the protection of Obi-Wan. I had a scrap piece of acrylic that I used as a prototype. I drilled a hole a little larger than the lightsaber. Placed the lightsaber in. I used 2 white micro LED bright lights on either side of the door. The nice thing about these micro LED lights is they are very small, but they are very, very bright.
I then glued all these in place with a high-temp glue gun to simulate melting metal. Take your time and work in small amounts. I then used layers of acrylic paint in 4 different colors of yellows, oranges, and reds to give the illusion of superheated melting metal. The prototype came out great. I love the way the final product came out over the painted and conditioned basswood door. To give more depth to the Death Star hallway, I decided with a crooked mirror. Finally, I encapsulated the diorama with 1/4-inch thick MDF with natural maple veneer. Again, using the sanding sealer from Minwax, then stained in polyurethane with high gloss. I had some gloss black acrylic that I was able to cut out the Jedi and Sith logos and mount to the sides and the top. I love this accent. I really wish I was able to video document this whole project, but this already took me 2 months, and there was one heck of a learning curve. Next time for sure. Definitely not perfect, but I couldn't be happier.